In-depth journalism in the Memphis community, the Daily Memphian is of Memphis, not just in Memphis, and seeks to tell the stories of this city. TheDailyMemphian.com. Truth in place.
Welcome back to another edition of the Daily Memphian's Memphis Grizzlies podcast. This is Drew Hill, joined as always by Chris Herrington. The Grizzlies just concluded last night on Monday, April the 6th, their final regular season home game of the season. Chris was in the building for that one. I'm doing an away pod this week. I had the last game off to do some stuff with some family. And got away for a little bit, but I still was paying attention to the score. I didn't watch a ton of the game because the games don't feel particularly fruitful at this point in the season, to be honest. But I did pay attention because we have a close race to follow now in the reverse standings. But I want to start somewhere else this week, Chris.
Well, one thing about the game, though.
Okay. Tell us about the game.
I really hope, for his sake, for the fans' sake, for everybody's sake, I hope Thomas Isolo has a real basketball team to work with next season. Like, the Grizzlies in a rebuild are not going to, they're not going to go in some playoff run. They probably won't even make the playoffs. But I hope he has a real team to work with because he has guys playing hard. And when he has real players out there, he's got them playing well. Like, that game, they got up, like, when they were started the game with like roster players and not even their best, it's like Coward and Gigi and, the guys who they had available who were roster guys, Coward and Gigi and Cam and those guys. They get up 14, 16, whatever. He had to sit those guys down to secure that loss. Cedric Coward was plus 19 in 17 minutes. Like, they look good when they had real players out there. And that has sort of been the case lately, even amid this losing. I just hope he has a real team to work with.
You simply cannot win that basketball game last night.
No. I had no problem with him, like, setting Coward down after 17 minutes up with a plus 19 on his plus minus. These are the incentives, and this is what you have to do, and that's what he did.
This is the system that's in place.
Yeah.
The Grizzlies just have to deal with the system that's in front of them. This is the system. They're going to change the system, but this is the system.
Yep.
And if you look at the reverse standings and you're thinking about the betterment of your organization going forward, how meaningful is it to win an April basketball game that doesn't matter because you're eliminated from the playoffs versus what I wrote about yesterday with the tiebreakers and stuff? What could be like, I guess if you win this game, you could finish ninth or you could finish eighth instead of sixth in the standings. And
right.
Significant difference, like 12% difference to jump to top four.
So he got asked about playing the starters not many minutes, even though they all have like positive plus minuses, and he gave some answer. He has to some answer about, worried about their wear and tear and, their workload and all of this. We all know this is not the case. We all know that like he understood the assignment in that game, which is fine. Your job is to do what's best for the organization. And the hope is that next season, what's best for the organization is just to try to win every game in front of you.
Yeah. Well, we're going off script already, but, Jeff wrote a column yesterday in which he talked to some fans that had some frustrations, which is certainly understandable after a season that went the way that it did. One of the things is like the Isolo stuff. I feel like that's just a product of the Morant thing that happened. That's why some fans are frustrated with him. I don't necessarily think, there were some frustrations about the rotations earlier in the season, and maybe that's fair. But outside of that, it's really hard to judge the guy based on what happened this season because he's never had a deck of cards to even work with. He's never had the cards to play. He
has never had a coherent team for more than 2 weeks as a head coach. I think,
and when he did, it was pretty good, by the way.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
And from a personality standpoint, I think, it's just hard to overcome the losing, right? I think it's true that he's a little bit more of a reserved, Scandinavian, a little bit more reserved personality, a little bit, the way he speaks. He's also English, not his first language, but the way he speaks about things, the way he thinks is a little unconventional, maybe for a lot of people. And he is not the kind of coach who's probably gonna get everybody fired up speaking at the touchdown club or whatever. But he's a really friendly guy. And he's a pretty down to earth guy when you get past just the way he talks about stuff. And I think if he has a good team next season, or if not even a good team, if he is a functional team, I think they're going to play hard, they're going to have success, and people are going to come around on him. Is what I think is going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in the it's too early to tell, but I think I
No,
can,
no, it's an incomplete. I wrote that last week. It's an incomplete
yeah,
on
it's
the
an
coaching
incomplete.
hire.
It's an incomplete. It's too early to tell. I want to see what the guy can do with a reasonable roster on the floor. I do agree with a lot of his logical thinking. I think a lot of the explanations he gives are very reasonable. Like he's very good at explaining how he thinks about certain things. And I appreciate that because I don't think that every coach is capable of doing that in the
Right.
manner that he is. Everything is very clearly thought through. Um, but whether or not he's a good NBA coach, I mean, how could we know? Like, there's no way to know, right?
Nope.
We have to see what it looks like with like some some players on the floor, and see how he performs relative to what the roster looks like. And this year, the roster was as pretty much as bad as it could be, except for a couple weeks out of the season.
I
So
mean,
like, it's
even the
just
2 weeks he had Edie where they went 7-4 and the 11 games Edie played, he talked about that before the game last night about how that was the only time of the season where they had enough stability to build game to game, right? Even then, John Morant played less than 5 minutes of those 7 games. So he never really had it.
yeah. So anyway, you can go read Jeff's column. He had some thoughts on how the Grizzlies operate. I'll let his words be his words, but yeah, I would suggest you go check that out, as well as all of our stuff at the Daily Memphian. What I was going to get to is we did have some players essentially do their exit interviews a little bit
Yeah.
early yesterday.
Speaking of Zach Edey, right?
Speaking of Zach Edey, you were there for all of them. I had the chance to listen to a lot of them, and I read your story this morning off of that. You can go check that out as well. Were there any comments that struck you particularly coming out of that? I think it was what Zach Edey, Scottie Pippen, Santi Aldama, and maybe one other.
So those three and Jalen Wells
Jalen
spoke
Wells.
before
Yeah,
the game, and then Omax Prosper. I mean, he was always going to be available after the game, but it was considered his exit interview with the media as well because the first four guys who spoke before the game, obviously they've been shut down for the season due to injury, and so they're not going to be made available on Monday. It was sort of getting that out of the way now. And then with Prosper, from what I understand, he may not be there Monday because he may be going to the WNBA draft because his sister is a prospect for the WNBA. So shout out to her. So those five spoke, and I think the most notable of the two, for different reasons or related reasons, but were probably Edie and Pippen. Edie's just the most important player. And I think what was really striking to me in the Edie thing, and it wasn't anything we didn't know, but to hear him say it really
yeah,
underscored the gravity of it. And he got asked about, you know, what we all can see, right? You've had consecutive surgeries on the same ankle as a 7'4", 300-pound guy or whatever. Is that concerning to you? And he said basically, it's concerning to everybody, but I know what kind of player I can be. He said earlier that what he did this season, those 11 games, proved to him what he can do in the NBA. He said it's concerning to everybody, but I know what kind of player I can be. I know how hard I'm going to work to get out on the court, and then whatever happens happens. And that's just the truth. Whatever happens happens, but nobody knows what's going to happen. And it's a really big pivot point for this rebuild and for what the Grizzlies are going to be in the future.
yeah. I think the answer that you want, which I'm not sure Edie was capable of giving, is I'm going to be fine, right?
I mean, he could have said that, but
It may not be the truth, though.
no, I want the truth. I don't care about getting. I don't. I'm not interested in people saying the right thing if they don't. If it's clearly not like real.
It would have injected some positivity, but doesn't necessarily make it the right thing to say, right? In that
Yeah.
situation. And so, yeah, that was you started where I thought you would go with the Edie stuff, and I wish there was like more we could say about it, but I
No,
just don't know what else there is to say about it.
but I think the other part of that was interesting to me, where he basically said, these are the 11 games I played this season prove to me what I can be. And then he got asked later, what is that again? He said a dominant force. And so he is someone who has a lot of self confidence. He's a big guy who wants to be big. He wants to mash. He wants to dominate. He thinks he can be great. But the reality is, he said these injury things, and he has to work, and he needs to work, and he also needs luck. And work is not enough. And it's a really huge thing for the franchise that's very uncertain, and it's just going to be uncertain.
What did he say about the elbow, which was a secondary thing?
Yeah, I asked him about the elbow thing, and he it was almost like a mosquito he was swatting away. He was like that doesn't matter. He said, I've had the elbows bother me a little bit since middle school, and I just decided, since I'm wearing this boot, I might as well do something to it. He acted like the elbow thing was like not even like a fly on his shoulder, basically. So he was totally dismissive of that as a concern.
Are you buying that?
I am. When he just really basically shrugged and said, I guess while I'm wearing this boot, I might as well get it cleaned out or whatever. I don't.
The ankle isn't going to have 300 pounds of force, or the elbow. The elbow isn't going to have 300 pounds of force on it.
This is my point. There's enough to worry about with the ankle. To me, the elbow is a. I'm going to take him at his word that this is like a non-issue relative to the other.
Okay, so that's obviously a concern. And again, I wish there was more to say about it, but there's really not. It's just like we have to wait and see how he's going to respond and how healthy he's going to look when he does get back on the floor, which, like, it's going to be a long recovery for him.
One of the things he said was that, when he came back, he felt fine for a few games, and then it started to bother him. And he said, maybe I pushed too hard, maybe I played a little bit too many minutes, which sort of suggests to me that they're going to be extra cautious coming out of this. That they have said that, I don't know how they phrase it. They basically said, that they think he'll be back for opening night. They haven't promised, training camp, preseason, any of that. They think he'll be ready for opening night. But I think even if that is the case, I don't think he's going to be playing 30 minutes opening night, right? I think they're going to be real careful with this.
I think that's the smart thing to do, given how much of the future is attached to a guy like that. The other interesting one, I'll go next, even though I wasn't there. The Scottie Pippen double toe surgery was interesting, just because it seemed like he didn't think he was going to have a problem with it, and then he had a problem with it, and that was I don't know. Now that problem should be solved, right? Because the bone is removed completely, but we'll see what happens.
It's easy to second guess medical stuff, like obviously in hindsight. It's interesting to me that he chose, and I talked to him about this in March. I talked to him when they were in Minnesota, and I wrote a story about this. He had dealt with discomfort in his left foot since the pre-draft process, 2 or 3 years ago. And it just he kept playing on it because, it got worse over time. So it wasn't so bad early on he couldn't play with it. Also, he was trying to secure his spot in the league, right? If you have a surgery and you don't even have a contract, who knows where your career is going to go? So he was fighting to get himself into the league. And so he just played through the pain and whatever. And then it finally reached the point last preseason where not only was the left toe getting worse, but he said he started, this is before the surgery, he said he started to feel discomfort in his right foot, which he thought was due to overcompensation. He said, okay, I need to finally get this left toe done now that the right foot's starting to hurt. And that's all he said about it at the time. Well, now in the wake of this having surgery on the right foot, I went back to him again and said, could you have gotten both done, in the preseason? And he did say, and he may have said more than the organization will want him to, I don't know. But,
God, he's a little notorious for that.
I stuck a mic in his face and let's go. And he basically said, the doctors looked at both. And this may be, sometimes, things just don't work out the way you think they will. I don't mean this to be critical, but what he said was they looked at both. And at that point, the right toe, the doctors didn't think it was bad enough to warrant surgery. And they thought that during the layoff that he was going to have to take for the surgery to heal on the left, the right would heal just by being off of it and not playing. And what happened was when he came back, that was not the case, and instead playing on it continued to make the right toe worse. And then he had the surgery. I mean, the good news out of this, to your point, this is the kind of thing we've seen. Desmond Bain had the surgery. It has no effect. It had no effect on him. It's the kind of thing that shouldn't be a problem. And because the Grizzlies had already, pivoted to the rebuild or whatever, there was no cost. Scottie Pippen, coming back and then having to shut down for the season, honestly was probably good for the tank anyway. So there's no real cost to it. But in retrospect, you wonder about should have just gotten it done, got both done at the same time.
Where do you think Scotty stands in terms of the backcourt shuffle of small guards that exist? Like we think Ja is going to be moving on this offseason. You still have Javon Small in the backcourt who's looked really good. Yeah, to end the season. You have Scotty there. I know I'm forgetting someone.
Yeah, you're getting multiple people. You have Cam Spencer.
That's right. And
you have Walter Clayton.
And
still Ty Jerome.
Yes. Ty Jerome, I think, a little bit different level of player.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Than the rest.
And you got 3 picks. You got 3 picks in the draft.
So where does Scotty stand?
It's a good question. It's a good question. That's one of the things I wrote about when I wrote about him in March, in addition to the injury, is I think he'd been a little bit out of sight, out of mind. And to me, of all those players, again, you're right, set Jerome aside, but of the rest, he's the one who has proven the most at the highest.
He scored 30 points in playoff games.
This is my point. He's proven the most at the higher level of all those guys. He's also the guy who has the most proven two-way ability, and that he is a very good on-ball defender, a very good disruptive defender, super high steal rate, who is a career 40% three-point shooter, right? He's not the purest of point guards, but to me, I was sort of suggesting to the world, let's not forget this guy. This guy is sort of proven more than these other guys. I think a key there is he's proven it to Isolo. Isolo was coaching those playoff games. And so, and given the contract he's on, and given the surgery stuff, he probably doesn't have huge trade value. And given the contract he's on, he probably has a lot of player value, right? So I think he's more valuable to the Grizzlies as a player than a trade piece. And he can play on or off the ball. I think he can play with any, if they draft a point guard in the lottery, he can play with that guy in lineups. So I think they should have a fairly high priority on Scottie Pippen. Not to be a spoiler, but I think when I do my offseason player rankings I do every year, you'll see that my opinion on Pippen is maybe a little bit higher than consensus.
So Omax obviously had a great season for himself.
Really did.
The shooting really improved. The motor was really impressive. To me, looked like the type of player that, cemented himself as a real NBA guy over the course of this season, which I'm not sure he can. Well, we know he didn't come in that way because he was on a two-way contract.
Yeah, he got cut from the Mavericks, right?
But I think he's really cemented himself as someone that can be useful. Whether we talked about this with the John Conchar thing. There was a lot worse players to be your 10th guy off the bench than John Conchar. And I feel kind of the same way about Omax Prosper. When you need somebody to fill minutes, I think he's a very good option to fill minutes. And it coincides with what happened, and we haven't even talked about this, with the Brandon Clark arrest that happened later in the day after we had recorded our podcast last week.
There's been a lot going on.
I know. So we did a lot of reporting on that over at the Daily Memphian. And I think that, there are some similarities there between what Omax can bring you as a front court player and what Brandon Clark can bring you as a front court player. Brandon Clark's going to be 30 by the time the next season comes around. And he's now got this off-court thing, which I'm assuming the league will do something about. And there's a lot. There's a lot going on here.
I think, and I hope the off-court thing clears up for him. Obviously, from what I can gather, because I'd never heard of the substance, and when we reported on it, and then once I talked to people, I just I just hope it clears up. I don't think this should be a big deal for him based on what I've seen. Hopefully, it'll clear up from a legal standpoint. one point I'll make is that I think because of he's had the legal issue that may color what people think about what happens going forward. I think even without any of that, the Brandon Clark thing with the Grizzlies was probably. I mean, he's under contract next year, but given his injury situation, given the roster spot crunch on the team, and given that they have committed to a rebuild, I think it's fairly unlikely he'll be on the roster next season. And I think that would have been the case even without any of this.
I would agree. I would agree with all of that. I did talk to a few people in law enforcement just to try to understand what comes next. And I don't want to speculate too much, but oftentimes in these legal situations, when a plea deal is reached, it's like it ends up being a lot less than what is initially charged. And so
you overcharge on the front end so you can plead down to something, right?
Right. So we'll see what happens with that situation. Like I said, I don't want to speculate too much, but that's typically what happens in these types of situations, especially in rural areas of Arkansas. So,
But Omax, we sort of got on a tangent off of Omax.
He's been great, and I think he's a piece for this team moving forward.
I would like for him to be a piece. My only hesitation is the roster spot crunch. That's my only hesitation.
Yeah,
I think they should. I think they should want to have a spot for him. The contract is non-guaranteed, so if they have too many players, which I think they're going to have too many players, it's an easy to clear a spot that way. But I would rather be looking for other ways to clear a spot because I would like to have him on the team next season if I'm the Grizzlies.
Yeah, back end of the rotation, good player for that spot if you can keep him there. Anything else that came out of the exit interviews?
I don't think the Santi stuff was particularly notable. I don't think the Jalen Wells or Santi stuff was all that notable. You can go read it in the story, but I don't think there was anything that newsy there. These are both seem to be pretty minor injury situations. They should be cleared up by middle of the summer. And so there we go with those guys.
Okay, let's talk about where the Grizzlies stand now. They are at what? 25 and 53, 54 in the standings? Am I missing some games here? I might be.
The 25 is right. They're 25
and 54. 25 and 54 on the season. If you look at the reverse standings now, you have New Orleans at 25 and 54, Memphis at 25 and 54, and Dallas at 25 and 53. So this has become an extremely tight race in the reverse standings for the Memphis Grizzlies. It's interesting to look at the rest of the schedules the rest of the way because you've got a Grizzlies game on Friday against Utah, which is a difficult game to lose if we're just being honest about it, because Utah has tanked their way all the way to even with the Sacramento Kings. So Utah is, which a little bit of malpractice by the Kings, in my opinion, on this one. And maybe a little bit of malpractice by the Pelicans too, who are eliminated and just still aren't really trying all that hard to win, it feels like. But it's an interesting situation because you have the Grizzlies with a game against the Jazz. You also have the Pelicans, who have no reason to lose, with a game against the Jazz
in New Orleans.
And then Dallas is probably best positioned to lose the rest of the games the rest of the way, but they still have to finish the season against Chicago, who's not trying to win either, and has been in like a little bit of a close race with the Bucks. So it's going to be fascinating to see who can lose these games. But like the truth is, if you're looking at it the rest of the way,
it'll be fascinating to see, but maybe not fascinating to watch.
Exactly. The truth is, if the Grizzlies want to try to secure like an extra 7% at the minimum here,
and
higher lottery odds,
and a higher floor, I think that's
a higher floor.
Yeah.
Then they need to lose the rest of these games. Like they have to find a way to lose to Utah if that's truly the goal. And like, you're not this bad for this long to not try. That's my point. I know talking about the tanking stuff can be uncomfortable, but like it's just it is what it is. This is the situation. And so I did take a dive into the tiebreaker stuff, which I think is worth explaining for folks that haven't really paid all that close attention to it. And it's been a long time since the Grizzlies have been bad like this. I mean, the 23-24 season was a disaster, but we didn't really deal with the tiebreaker scenario stuff, which is essentially if you finish with an identical record to one team, they'll average the odds, the odds to jump into the top four with the team that you tied with. And then there will be basically a coin flip, but I think it's just a 50-50 draw to determine a fallback order. So essentially what happens is, let's say the Grizzlies and the Mavericks tie for seventh, right? Instead of sixth. And I think right now they're tied for sixth, but let's say they tie for seventh. Then they would flatten the lottery odds. So instead of one team having a 32% chance and the other team having a 26.3% chance, both teams would just have a 29% chance to jump into the top four. And then they would do this coin flip. And the coin flip basically determines if neither of these teams jump up, who gets the higher draft pick in order. Like who actually would get the seventh pick and who would get the eighth pick in this scenario where they tie for seventh. So and then that happens. The league essentially just does it and then I guess tells the teams what the tiebreaker was, how it concluded. And so if it's a three-way tie, which I think is also possible if somehow these teams all lose the rest of their games, then you're going to end up in a scenario where they split the lottery odds three ways. They average out the lottery odds with all three teams, and then they do a series of coin flips / 50-50 draws to determine the fallback order among those three. So I'm just saying all this to explain what might happen here based on how close this race has become. But the bottom line is that the Grizzlies just have to find a way to lose these games to end the season. And I don't know. The Jazz game is going to be a difficult task.
Yeah. I mean, it could go any number of ways with those three teams that are in a cluster, all tied with 25 wins. I think there's a decent chance it'll end up with the Mavericks and Grizzlies tied, and then the Pelicans who will take that win, maybe at home against Utah. They'll be in the 8, and then maybe you have the Mavs and Grizzlies tied at 6-7. And to your point, they'll even out the odds, and the random drawing will determine the placement, will determine the floor of the pick. And so we'll see. They're going to be in that 6 to 8 range, and there's a good chance that at a minimum there'll be a tie in there. Like I don't think they're going to be alone in 8. Like that's not going to happen. And so that means that their odds are almost certainly going to be better. Almost certainly. There's a very good chance their odds will be better than whatever the 8th place odds are.
Here's the thing. I kind of think there's a gap at 7 in the draft. From 7 to 8.
Yeah, you might be right. You might be right.
Like that's why I'm paying such close attention to this.
That was not my tier break last week when we were talking about this, but I'm rethinking that a little bit. You might be right.
I think you have that top 4, and then the top 4 being Debansa, Boozer, Peterson, Wilson, and then I kind of have a 3 after that, which is Flemings, Wagler, Acuff, Break, and then the rest.
Yeah. I think you worry about the ceiling with Burries, and you worry about just the unpredictability or maybe even the floor stuff with Brown and Phylon a little bit. So I do think those 3 guards that you mentioned feel a little bit safer, both in terms of floor and ceiling than the others. You might be right about that.
We're not going to do this on this podcast, but I have started now to officially build the board. And that was something that occurred to me as I was filling it out yesterday. And I thought, that is something that's certainly notable. It's something that our colleague John Martin has been saying on the radio too, is the break from 7 to 8 is a big one. If so, I think it's pretty important that the Grizzlies try to stay within that top 7 range. And I think if they do, we're going to come away with one player that people are excited to watch in summer league and to learn about over the summer in the off season and watch get into the preseason next year. If not, I think the excitement level may be a little bit lower. So, I certainly hope for the Grizzlies' sake they're able to stay inside of that top 7 there. Okay, let's continue this podcast with our tankathon simulation and a few other topics. But first, let's take a break for a message from our sponsor.
Want to make a big impact without getting lost in a big system? Join Youth Villages to be a force for families while becoming part of one. Help make positive changes on a national scale, one community at a time. It takes a family to transform lives. Start with yours. Apply now at youthvillages.org/careers.
Okay, Chris, do you want to do our tankathon spin for the week?
Let's do it.
Okay, ready? See, this is what I'm talking about. This is what I was just talking about before the break here. I have Washington at number 1, Dallas jumping to number 2, New Orleans to the Hawks jumping to number 3, Utah at number 4, then the Clippers getting the Pacers pick at number 5, the Nets, the Kings, and then the Grizzlies at 8. So that would be a scenario I would very much not be in favor of, because you have multiple West teams jumping up, and you have the Grizzlies picking 8, and I think there's a break at 7.
Mine's more neutral. We'll go with mine. I got the Sacramento Kings getting the first pick. You can always depend on them to screw it up. I got Washington 2nd. I got Utah 3rd, which I don't love. I got Indiana 4, Brooklyn getting pushed down to 5, and then it goes to form, which would be Atlanta from New Orleans 6, and the Grizzlies holding at 7.
I would be okay with that. We do have the Magic in the back end of the lottery now. It's worth monitoring what's going on in the Eastern Conference, as we've noted on this podcast several times. It's a very close race. You have Philadelphia at 43-36, Orlando at 43-36, Miami at 41-37. Going to be more difficult for them to catch up to the rest of that group. And then you have Charlotte, still in there at 43-36. So it's basically dead even.
Yeah, I don't feel great about it anymore.
Why? You think Orlando's turning a corner?
Yeah, and I look at it, just glancing at the schedule, I see those other teams are going to be taking some losses. Like the Heat and the Raptors play each other twice, so that's like, that's going to be a 500 record among those 4 games for those teams, and we're looking for better than that.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, we just got to get Orlando in the play-in against some formidable competition.
Right.
I think that's still possible, but the 9-10 seems less likely.
Yep.
So we'll see what happens there. Phoenix is going to be in the play-in as well, but I think they'll probably get out of the play-in. So the chances at getting that second lottery pick decreasing for the Memphis Grizzlies, but there's still chance. There's still a chance that could happen. The other big topic of the week, and Chris, I've tried to follow your lead on not being offended by everything that is ever said about Memphis, but it was big news. It was.
You don't have to be just because you're not offended by everything doesn't mean you're not offended by some things, right?
This one was particularly distasteful, I thought.
Yeah.
You had LeBron James on Bob Does Sports, which is a YouTube channel, very popular golf YouTube channel. And for what it's worth, I do think some of the Bob Does Sports like PGA heckling videos that he does with the PGA golfers, I found them to be funny. I've seen some of them on TikTok. But this comment from LeBron about, it wasn't like he even got set up for it. He wasn't even asked about Memphis. He just was asked if the travel gets harder at his age. And he decided to take some shots and said he's not the first player to say it, but they should just move the team to Nashville. And don't they have NASCAR, hockey, and whatever in Nashville? And it felt out of the blue. It felt like a comment almost to try to be funny in the situation. He said he might have pulled an Eli Manning if the Grizzlies had won the lottery in 2003 and refused to play for the Memphis Grizzlies, which I don't think would have happened personally. This is totally that felt overblown as well. And then it was followed up later on by comments from him and his agent, Rich Paul, essentially saying, well, I didn't, and he was asked if it's, he's faced some criticism because Memphis is a majority black city that has a NBA team. And he said, well, I didn't say that I don't like black people. He just said, I don't like playing there. And I also included Milwaukee. I said Milwaukee too. I just don't want to stay at the Hyatt Centric, which missed the point of what people were outraged about in the first place in Memphis, I thought. So I just found most of it to just be distasteful, and it was pretty unnecessary. And if you want to go read, I did do a column about the Raptors and what they did on their random Thursday in Memphis. And there were some comments in there from both Garrett Temple and James Wade. James Wade, an assistant coach who was a WNBA head coach and champion, and is also from Memphis. And I thought their comments presented really well. And it was just a messy situation that I don't think ever needed to happen, but happened as a result of maybe LeBron trying to be funny in the moment. Your thoughts on the situation?
Yeah, you and Jeff both wrote good columns, different kind of columns, but really good columns on all of this. I passed. I passed on writing about it when it happened. Maybe I should not have. I sort of missed the moment on that. Um, but if you will indulge me here to go ISO Joe for a couple minutes,
Go ahead. Please do.
I do have some stuff to add to this that I think has not been part of the conversation. I don't need to repeat, what others have said about LeBron, which we sort of went over some of that, almost all of which I agree with. I mean, never mind the maybe spoiled attitude of superstar basketball players about a 1 or 2 night hotel stay. And obviously for James to flippantly suggest Memphis lose a team as a means to catering to some dudes on a golf course, I think reflected poorly on him, as did, as you pointed out, the disingenuous way he handled the follow-up questions. But I want to talk about what I think is a substantive dynamic that's bubbling beneath all of this. Because LeBron James, the one thing I'll disagree with you about slightly is you said out of the blue. LeBron James is at least the 4th notable figure in the NBA in the recent weeks to say something about a potential NBA team in Nashville or about a Memphis relocation to Nashville. And he even said, when he said other people are saying it, so I'm going to say it too. That was actually even part of his quote in this video. And I want to talk about that a little bit, because I think that's the real substance of this that sort of is getting lost in the we're mad at LeBron James, which we should be mad at LeBron James. I think the move towards potential NBA expansion over the last year or so has provoked a lot of conversation around the league. Should the NBA expand? Or Seattle and Las Vegas the right cities? What about some existing teams that have their own issues, whether it's market size or it's their arena issues or their ownership uncertainty or what have you? Not just Memphis, there are other situations around the league that are uncertain: New Orleans, Portland, Minnesota, others. I think amid all of that, I think some people around the NBA have wondered aloud, but privately, about whether it wouldn't make more sense to have a team in Nashville than Memphis. You and I both became aware of some of those conversations earlier this season, those behind the scenes conversations. And really all of that was sort of waiting for a permission slip to go public. And I think when the league sort of announced they were going to move forward on a process for potential expansion to Seattle and Las Vegas, that kind of became the permission slip for some of these private conversations to bubble up. And so what happened, like literally on that day, like somebody asked David Adelman, the coach of the Nuggets, about relocation. And I don't think he mentioned Memphis at all, but he said something about, well, Nashville's a great city. Why wouldn't we consider Nashville? And it was around that time that Stephen A. Smith, he didn't suggest relocation, but he sort of, acknowledged Memphis and said, well, Nashville, and started talking about Nashville. And then Draymond Green went all the way to, why don't we just move Memphis to Nashville? And LeBron James piggybacking on that. I think one unfortunate thing here is that the lease deal for the Grizzlies at FedEx Forum, the lease extension, did not get done before this conversation bubbled to the surface. Not to cut it off necessarily, but to at least to ground it in an acknowledgement of stability in Memphis. I think it's really unfortunate that I think this conversation was always bubbling around, and I think the lease should have been done earlier to try to cut that off a little bit. I think there are obviously players in the NBA who feel this way about maybe the team should move. Two of them have said so. I couldn't name names, but I'm going to guess there are probably other owners around the league and other league officials who probably feel that way. But here's what's important. There is no sense that I have, or I don't think anyone else has, that anyone involved with the Memphis Grizzlies feels this way. And maybe even more importantly, there's no sense that any decision makers in Nashville or in the state of Tennessee feel this way. Instead, all parties are working on a lease to extend, a lease extension for FedEx Forum in Memphis, one that's going to involve a lot of state money. And another interesting thing that's happened in the middle of all this, another person spoke publicly. That was the mayor of Nashville. He got asked after the Stephen A. Smith, Draymond Green stuff. He got asked about this idea of the Grizzlies relocating to Nashville. And I don't have his exact quote, but to paraphrase, he basically said the Grizzlies are great in Memphis. He pushed back at any idea of relocating the Grizzlies. But here's something he did say. He did say, we love the Grizzlies. We love the Grizzlies. We love that they've done their training camps here. We'd like to see some games in Nashville. I don't think that's an idea that hit his head when he got asked that question. For him to say that publicly tells me that's something he's been thinking about and probably talking about to people. And I think it's worth noting that from the very beginning, from day one, when the Grizzlies moved to Memphis from Vancouver, they never wanted to be just a Memphis team. They wanted to be a regional team based in Memphis. They've always wanted eyeballs and ticket buyers and sponsorship deals in Jonesboro, Arkansas, in Little Rock, Arkansas, in Tupelo, Mississippi, in Kennett, Missouri. Murray, Kentucky may not go as well for them in the future. And most definitely in Nashville, Tennessee, which is the biggest market within the vicinity. So based on all of that, based on what the mayor of Nashville said, I think there's a decent chance that either as part of a new lease or maybe just in the aftermath of a new lease, you're going to see the Grizzlies try to strengthen their relationship with Nashville. They've already done training camp there. Maybe they play I don't know. I'm spitballing here. Maybe they play a preseason game. Maybe they play a couple regular season games. I think you could see more stuff to try to tie the team in Nashville and be more of a state team. And I think all of that is probably smart. The problem now is that because all of this has taken so long and it has not gotten out ahead of this conversation bubbling to the surface, that when stuff like that does happen, people in Memphis might have their backs up more than they need to about any Nashville stuff, right? So I think it's important to understand that this is not just about LeBron James insulted Memphis. This is about LeBron James giving voice to a conversation that has been happening around the NBA that's more substantive than that. And one that I think, people should not be worried about, but that I really wish that the Grizzlies and the city and everyone had gotten everything tied up before this bubbled up, because it was always going to bubble up when this expansion stuff happened.
I agree with everything you just said. And I think you're 100% right on the permission slip comment, because the whole play some games in Nashville thing is not new to the folks that are behind the scenes, right? That is not new. That is something that has floated for a while. It doesn't mean that the team's moving to Nashville, though. Right?
It doesn't mean that's going to happen either. That's informed speculation, but it's just speculative at this point.
Right. But exactly. These were conversations that were taking place that now have become bigger than they should be because of all these comments. I 100% agree with that. In terms of expressing some disappointment that the lease isn't done prior to these comments, I agree with you on that. And this maybe touches a little bit on Jeff's column that he said last night. I have a little bit of disappointment that it feels like the Raptors have spoken up for Memphis.
No, 100%.
Like, that's ridiculous. Somebody come out and say something, please. Help your fans.
One of the problems here, and I don't mean this as a criticism, but it's unfortunate. Desmond Bane's not here anymore, right? Jaron's not here anymore, and Ja is probably on his way out, and those are the guys who've been here a while, right? And whatever the issues are with Ja, and I think there are real issues, I think some fans have sort of haven't taken into account enough in terms of his availability and some of the reasons this is happening, right? Ja does love Memphis, and his family loves Memphis, and I think he has zero, for everything I've been able to tell, they have zero issues with Memphis. I think he's someone who would stand up for Memphis, but he's on his way out the door, And so all the players are too young and don't have the platform or voice for this right now.
That's right. So that's why you need someone higher up in the organization to say something.
I agree.
And I'm going to assume that Zach Kleiman will be asked about it. I hope there's a thoughtful answer there.
Yeah.
when the season ends, because he will talk again when the season ends. But the timing isn't great on that, right? Weeks will have gone by, a week and a half. Like that was not now that was the time to say something, not later. And I do find it a little disappointing. And just to be perfectly clear, like when I learned that the Raptors had gone to St. Jude and I knew I was going to write that column, like I went to the Raptors public relations staff and said, I have interest in writing this. And the Raptors felt like moved mountains to make these
Yeah.
things like happen for us. Like because they also there were people within the organization that found LeBron James comments to be kind of flippant and just not the most smart thing to do at the time. And
Right.
and so when I said, "Hey, like I want to write about the team going to St. Jude," they said, "Well, we have this guy with the Memphis connection and this guy with the Memphis connection and this guy with the Memphis connection and all of these people feel so strongly about this. How can we get them to you to like the Grizzlies didn't really do anything,
Yeah.
right? The coach said something who's been here for a year or 2 years, one as an assistant, and has only been the head coach for a season and a handful of games. It's
I
just,
think I think Isolo is accepting of trying to play that role, but he just doesn't have the standing for it either.
he doesn't.
He doesn't quite have the voice for it, but he doesn't really have the standing for it either. I will say, and only some very mild pushback because I agree with you generally. I think there's one complication here with the Grizzlies in that.
They're still negotiating.
Well, there's that, but tied into that, the Grizzlies' position, and not to speak for them because they don't speak for themselves, right? But I think their general position is not that. What do you mean? How dare you say there's problems with Memphis? There's no problems with Memphis. Their position is that yes, there are problems with Memphis, and we want to fix them, and we want state investment to fix these problems. So they're at a standpoint where they're wanting to acknowledge the problems because they're wanting to get money to try to address the problems.
Right. And I want to be totally fair. I do think that I don't know, some of the complaints miss me from like if you go read Jeff's column, like the fans with, the Robert Parra doesn't ever talk. Well, Robert Parra is the reason the Grizzlies are in Memphis. Like
Yeah.
I believe that to be true. Like I think we're fortunate that Robert Parra is the owner of the Memphis Grizzlies in Memphis. So I don't agree with that.
Well,
I,
let
and
me
like,
let me put a finer point on that because this goes way back, sort of before your time. Jeff is aware of this. Robert Parra, while he doesn't communicate publicly, my understanding is that he's a good relationship. The Parra ownership has a good relationship with the local minority owners. That was not always the case in the past. The previous ownership, the Michael Heisley ownership, was at odds with the local ownership for a long time. And I think it's been good for Memphis that the Parra ownership, which is the majority ownership, seems to have a good relationship with the primary local minority owners. I think that has been, while quiet, that has been productive.
so my point is more so that I'm not just being critical of the Grizzlies for not talking. Like I will give the Grizzlies credit for exactly what you just said. They're trying to improve the place.
Yeah.
And I understand that they're also still negotiating a lease right now. And so you don't want to just fully commit to one place and then your negotiation power is nerfed as a result of it. I'm understanding of that. But that was the moment. Like you had to meet that moment in some way. And like the coach can't, I thought he gave a perfectly fine answer, Isolo, but like as you pointed out, there's no one on the team that can really speak up for it. There's no one, no one on the coaching staff or not the head coach who can really speak up for it. Like I do like it's a small bone to pick, but I just wish they would have communicated something about that in the moment and stood up for the community to some degree because everyone else was doing it. And it did strike me as like, man, look at the Raptors making all these efforts, to be defensive
Right.
of a NBA franchise that's in the Western Conference that they play twice a year. But like they've got people from Memphis or people that have lived in Memphis on their team that care about the place and they want to say something. Like I found that to be good business by the Toronto Raptors. And I kind of wish we would have gotten more from the Grizzlies from a personal standpoint. I can understand why we maybe did not, but I still feel like they had the opportunity to meet the moment and they didn't, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Anything else before we get out of here?
No, I think we've covered the ground pretty well. We'll be back with people again after the season has officially closed and we've heard from everybody.
Yeah, that will be a good final season wrap up podcast that will also probably start a chain of several draft podcasts. We'll finish building out our boards. We'll talk more in detail about a lot of these players. And look, I can understand the disappointment of a season that went the wrong way. I can understand if you feel like maybe the rebuild was premature. That's your right to feel that way. But moving forward, the only thing to get excited about is the future of the franchise, and that starts with the NBA draft. So it's time to start getting excited about the NBA draft, in my opinion. Okay, real quick, before I sign off, there's more to life than basketball. What did you do this week in Memphis, Chris?
What did I do this week in Memphis, man? I just been straight working. I did get to see both my brothers and my nephews. I got a 3-year-old nephew and a 1-year-old nephew. I got to hang out with them on Easter Sunday. My 3-year-old nephew Finn gave me the formal invitation to sit next to him at the dinner table, which was quite. I mean, there's only 2 seats next to him. He sat at the head of the table, so me and my dad got to sit next to Finn, and then Finn remarked upon my lack of hair.
Yeah.
Because he has very long hair, and I said, I got clippers. I can go shave your head, and he was not so certain about that. So I know you get baby time every day these days, but I got some baby time this week.
Well, we're doing we're getting plenty of baby time this week. I don't ever do the shout out on the podcast thing because I don't know, but it is my dad's 60th birthday tomorrow. So I am here celebrating my dad's 60th birthday with his granddaughter, my daughter, and my wife. We are headed to the Cubs and Rays game at beautiful Tropicana Field later on today. So happy birthday to my dad. He's an avid listener of the show. And so that should be a good time. I will be back for the season wrap up, all of that, but just decided to make one last quick little stop down here to celebrate him really quick. So shout out there. And one thing that they have here, have you ever had Badass Coffee? The Hawaiian coffee chain?
No,
it's good.
I was about to say, the cold brew I make every night is pretty good, but I wouldn't call it badass.
It's good.
Okay.
I've discovered that my favorite coffee stops on road trips have become Badass, which is a Hawaiian coffee brand. I like it, and I'm not like an adventurous coffee order guy. I'm like a cold brew or iced coffee with light cream. So
that is also my order. No sweetener, a little bit of cream.
I keep it very simple, right? Yep. So I feel like I have a good baseline because I don't soup it up. And I have Phil's. I think it's called Phil's. Yeah, Phil's.
Yep. Which
they have on the West Coast. I always look forward to those trips. In there when we play when the Grizzlies are like taking on the Lakers I think they have one in Phoenix for the Suns and maybe one in Salt Lake City. And then now Badass Coffee. Those are my favorite stops. So there you go. There was our non-basketball segment of the pod. As Chris said, we will be back next week wrapping up the season and getting you set up for the lottery and the NBA draft. For Drew and for Chris, we're out of here.